Welcome, and let's talk something about Jakarta EE 10. And I've given this talk the subtitle Simplicity for Modern and Lightweight Cloud Applications, and we'll get a little bit into that. So my name is Ivar Grimstad. I work for the Eclipse Foundation as the Jakarta EE Developer Advocate. And if you're interested in contacting with me or have some questions afterwards, feel free to reach out on Twitter, LinkedIn, GitHub, etc. And that's about it. So here are my coordinates if you want to keep in touch. So Jakarta EE 10 is out. And it was launched on September 22nd, so it's pretty new. And as you see, the slogans for Jakarta EE 10 is it's a community-driven release, it's modernized, simplified, and lightweight compared to previous versions. And let's look at what it is. And before I do that, I'll just do a little kind of set the context of what we're talking about. And with Jakarta EE and Jakarta EE 10, we're talking about specifications. And when we talk about specification in our kind of context, what we mean is that we usually have these artifacts that are the components of a specification. It's usually a specification document. It's some API artifacts that is available from Maven Central. It's a test suite or test compatibility kit that you can use to verify that an implementation implements a specification. And then we have the compatible implementations, which are the TCK is used to verify that they are actually implementations of the specification. And in order to ratify a specification and make it final, we need at least one open source implementation. From there on, it's just go ahead. It doesn't have to be open source. It's good if it is open source, but you can do whatever license model you like to make your own compatible implementations. And there is no reference implementation. We just need one compatible implementation. And Jakarta EE 10 is you can see an overview of that platform here. And as you see, all the blue boxes here are the specifications that received updates in 10. And it's more than half. And many of them, about half of the blue, have a .0 version number. And since we're trying to do semantic versioning here, that means that they are potentially breaking changes. It's also a little bit of marketing in there, so if they want to kind of announce that they do some cool new features, they maybe do a major version. Otherwise, they do a minor versions, like the .1 releases. They are smaller updates to existing specifications. And there are some here that are marked gray that aren't updated in this release. That doesn't mean that they're not getting attention. It just meant that they didn't have anything for this release. They may be updated later. So they're not dead or anything. They just didn't update them for this release. And that's kind of what we're aiming for. We don't need to update every specification every time. It's just take those that are ready. And down in the corner, you see the orange one, CDI Lite. Which we like to call a new specification, but it's actually a part of CDI, so it's kind of a subset of CDI, but we like to call it as a new specification. I'll talk a little bit about CDI Lite later. If we take away the more enterprisey types of specification here, we're left with what we call the web profile. And web profile has been with us since Java EE 6, so that's nothing new. And that is a subset of the platform. So if you want to have a smaller runtime that doesn't implement all the enterprise things, you can get a compatible implementation using the web profile as well. If we take away the WebB or traditional web applications or the specifications targeting those kind of applications, we're left with a set of specifications that are aiming for headless services or microservices, if you like. And that is the brand new Jakarta EE Core Profile. And that is something we're introducing in 10. It's a smaller subset enabling smaller runtimes to get certified as Jakarta EE compatible. Another thing we did with 10 is to raise the API source level from 8 to 11. And that may seem like kind of a defensive thing just to go 11. I mean, we're at 19 now, so why not go further? But we figured out that there weren't actually that many specifications that had things they wanted to incorporate in their APIs that required more than 11. And that means that more people can upgrade. You don't have to go to a higher Java SE 11. So we keep the API sources at a Java SE 11 language level. We compile them to Java SE 11 so you can run them in the Java SE 11 runtime. But we make sure that the TCK runs on 11 and 17. And that means that you can develop your applications using Java 17 features as you like. Just make sure your runtime supports it. And we make sure that the TCK is runnable with 11 and 17. So if you want to use 17 with the Jakarta EE 10, go ahead and do it, because that's what it's built for. And the key here is that we verify the TCK on 11 and 17. So let's go through a couple of these specifications. I'm not going to go through all of them, just a couple of them. And let's start with security. And with security, they're doing a major update. I think they're removing some things and cleaning up the APIs. That's why it's a major, so it's kind of breaking. It's adding new features and evolving the API. And if you look at security, it was introduced in Java EE 8. So it's a fairly new specification. And it has a very nice application and developer-friendly API to configure security. And what I did for this release was to add support for OpenID Connect. And you may have used OpenID Connect with Java EE before, or Jakarta EE, but now you can do it in a standard portable way across implementations, so it's incorporated in the standard. The other updates they did was more about kind of getting ready for future work. Because security is actually 3 specifications. It's authentication, authorization, and the security. So what I did was kind of update the lower level specifications for authorization and authentication, which is more service provider interface for implementers, to kind of create the foundation for future work. And if you want to define the OpenID Connect authentication mechanism, this is how you do it on the server side. Then you use this fairly simple annotation called @OpenID authentication mechanism definition. So it's fairly verbose, but also very precise. And here are some examples of configuration parameters. There are lots more you can do. So you can configure your OpenID Connect provider in your application in a portable way. Let's then look at persistence. So Jakarta persistence is a minor update. They're adding features, evolving the API, but not breaking anything, so just doing some small work that is requested by the community. And one of them is to add UIDs as basic Java types. So now you can use UIDs and get it directly mapped in a standard way from the database to your entity. And in this case, I'm using a primary key as UID, not necessarily a good idea, but yeah, you can if you want. But you can do it on any field in your entity. RESTful Web Services. So Jakarta RESTful Web Services 3.1 are actually adding some cool stuff. And these are features that have been requested by the community for a long time. They initially wanted to do a 4.0 release to kind of incorporate CDI fully, but they went with a little bit more kind of maintaining compatibility approach and do a 3.1 release, and are planning a 4.0 release for next Jakarta EE version. And one of the things that has been requested there is standard support for multi-part form data. So now you can upload files in a standard way. You may have done it with REST-easy or similar before. But then you have used the REST-easy annotations and REST-easy kind of interface. Here you have it in a standard way in Jakarta REST, so you can move it across implementations. Another thing is they added the Java SE Bootstrap API. And that is actually fairly cool. And that means that you don't need to run your Jakarta REST application in an application server. You can just have a main method in your runnable jar and run it. So I thought I'd show that demo. So I have an application here called BootyDuke. And BootyDuke is are using the Jakarta RESTful Bootstrap API. And you can see here I'm using I'm not having a Jakarta 10 dependency. I'm just using the Jakarta REST API, and I'm using a beta of REST-EC where I have the core module, the undertone module, and the JSON binding to have some JSON back and forth. So I have to kind of maintain the dependencies myself. So I don't get just the provided dependency for like I usually would do with a Jakarta EE application, just have the API and the implementation do it for me. Here I have to package whatever I want myself. And I'm just using the Maven assembler plugin to create a jar. You can use shade or whatever mechanism you want to do. And the application in itself is very simple. It's just returning how the Jakarta RESTful. And the application in Jakarta REST is, as you would expect, it has the application path, which shows that it is a Jakarta REST application. And then I need a main method to kind of bootstrap it. And I'll use this class for it. You can use any class, but this is one I've configured. So what I'll do is to add a main method. And when I've added a main method, there are 3 things I need to do. And one of them is to add some configuration. And in my case, I'm adding port and root path. And that's kind of the minimum. I could go with the default, but I'll just add a port and a root path there. And there are several other options here to use this Fluent API to configure your application. So when I've configured it, I just need to instantiate my application. So I'll just create the application, and that is instantiate myself. And when I've done that, since I have the main method in this class, otherwise you would instantiate this from whatever class you were using. And the third thing I have to do is to start it. So, and to start it, I call the static method start on SE Bootstrap. I pass in the application and the config. And then I said, just run until I press Control Z. And since I'm using, just have to add the interrupt exception there as well. So that's all there is to it. And if I run this, let's go ahead and just compile it first. And then I just run it with Java, just jar, putty-duck with dependencies. And it starts fairly quickly, because it's a very small application. And I can go to localhost 8081, putty-duck, hello. And it says, hello, Jakarta Duke. So this is a fairly easy way to start to bootstrap a Jakarta REST application without using an application server or anything. So if you find that useful, please check it out and give them feedback. What do you think about it? Yeah, and this is the application I created. It's just using Jakarta REST and Jakarta JSON binding to get the JSON output. So then let's look at the core profile. And Jakarta EE Core Profile, the reasoning behind core profile is to target smaller runtimes. And one of the key things with core profile is to limit the amount of specifications that are needed to implement it. So this is the subset of specifications that core profile consists of. And you can see it's CDI for dependency injection, you have interceptors, annotations, and then the JSON specification under Jakarta REST. And that is more or less what you need for a simple RESTful web service. And with, currently, we have 3 core profile compatible implementations. It's OpenLiberty, Payara, and Wildfly. And these are not traditionally what we would think of as smaller runtimes, but they are fairly modular, so when you only use the core profile definition there, they get fairly small. But what really were in mind when we were thinking about the core profile was runtimes like Hello and Quarkus and Micronaut, for example. Whether they will be compatible or not, that remains to be seen. But I think both Helen and Quarkus have said that maybe early next year they will file for core profile compatibility. So these are the kind of runtimes that core profile is targeting. And one of the key specifications in core profile is CDI Lite 4.0. And with CDI 4.0 Lite, what we did with that, or what the team did there, was design it to be able to run in more restricted environments. And with more restricted environments, what we're talking about is the possibility of compile it to native using technologies like GraalVM. And that means, since CDI is very dynamic by nature, what they needed to do is figure out a way to make it dynamic at build time. So you can figure out all the stuff that is usually done at startup time at build time. And to do that, they had to create a new extensions API, because the old portable extensions is usually discovered when the server starts or the application starts, and you scan for annotations and it discovers, and it's very dynamic. So they've created a new build-compatible extensions API that you can use, and the build tools will discover it. They also changed, and this is the backwards incompatible change, is to change how the empty beans XML behaves. So if you rely on beans XML, an empty beans XML, meaning that everything is injectable, now everything will be injectable if it's annotated with the CDI scope annotation. So you may need to add a beans XML to make it work in a CDI4 environment. I'll demo this a little later. The first demo I'll do is to take a step back. And because most of you are probably not on Jakarta EE 9 or 10 yet, so I'm going to take a step back to Java E8 or Jakarta E8 and show how you can get over to 9 and 10. And this migration path is usually what I would recommend to do if you're planning to go from 8 to 10, is to take the 9 step in between. You don't necessarily have to go in production with the 9 version, but it's good to take that migration, because you can verify that your application works on the new namespace before you go to APIs that has changed. So the big thing between 8 and 9, as I mentioned, were the namespace change. And we switched all the specifications from JavaX to Jakarta. And that has implications for our entire ecosystem within Java and Enterprise Java and Cloud Native Java. And you may think, why should I care? I'm using Spring, or I'm just using Tomcat or Jetty. Well, it turns out that all of these are moving to the Jakarta namespace. So if you want to stay on the latest version of Jetty or Tomcat or Hibernate, your application needs to move from the JavaX to the Jakarta namespace as well. And usually that's just fix the import statements or something around there. Spring 6, Spring Boot 3, which is release candidate this week, is also moving to Jakarta namespace. So, and this namespace may ripple down to applications, so you need to do some changes here and there in order to be able to run on the latest versions. And I'll show a couple of ways of how you can do that. And one of them is transformation. And with transformation here, there are a couple of tools out there. I've listed 2 of them here. The Eclipse Transformer and the Apache Tomcat migration tool. These take your bytecode and translates them over to the Jakarta namespace for you. So you can just drop the jar or war file into the command line here, and out on the other hand, it's a modified jar or war on the Jakarta namespace. So you don't even have to touch your code. Some of these are actually possible to run at runtime. So some of the application servers have the Eclipse Transformer built in. So you can drop a JavaX namespace application into a Jakarta E9 server and it will work. But this is kind of on bytecode level, so this is sort of just test that it works. I wouldn't recommend to go and do this for a long time. The IDEs may help you. IntelliJ has some migration refactoring settings where you can go from, they call it from Java EE to Jakarta EE. It's more or less Jakarta 8 to Jakarta 9. And this does all the imports for you. But it also takes care that it doesn't take the imports that are not affected by this change, such as the Java XSQL, Swing, etc. And you can do it manually. And this is a kind of 6-step checklist for what you need to think of when you do this stuff. And I'll go through this list. I'll use the IDE for the two first steps. And then I'll go through what to think of for the last couple of steps. And to do this, I've created a simple Hello World application. And my Hello World application says, howdy Jakarta EE. And how many architects are here? Couple, yeah. So, and you know, when an architect creates a Hello World application, you just don't write system out println Hello World. You create a multi-tiered application with a database. And that's what I've done here. I have a database where the message is. I'm using Jakarta persistence to retrieve the message. Then I have some business logic around my message in Jakarta Enterprise Beans. And I use Jakarta REST and Jakarta JSON binding to produce a JSON output through a REST endpoint. I also threw in a CDI extension just to show that you have to think about some stuff there as well. So let's go look at the application and then do the steps of the migration. My application is called Corduc. It is running on Java SE 8. I'll upgrade that as we go. And you can see I have the Jakarta EE 8 APIs here. What I'll do first there is just to duplicate this dependency so I have both 8 and 9 in my class path. So I'm using 901 here. And if we look at the code, it's it has a the application is exactly the same as the one I had in. Don't worry about the compilation stuff. It's just the dependency I added here. So you can see exactly the same as I used in the SE Bootstrap example. I have the REST resource, which is fairly simple. It has at the hello path, it responds to HTTP GET, produces application JSON, and uses this EJB that I've injected that is using the find greetings method there. This is my business logic around it. It finds the first from the repository that is injected here. You can see it's a stateless session bin. It finds the first one, otherwise it just hard-codes the value. And the find method in my repository is using the entity manager from Jakarta persistence. And I'm using criteria language to just select all from the greeting table. And my entity is defined in this simple class where I have the greeting table, it's an entity, and I have a ID message and email. So it's a fairly simple data object. And it has getters and setters to that. The CDI extension I mentioned is, I have this @dukes annotation here, and I'm just in the extension. I'm scanning for the @dukes annotation and just logs a message in the console. Let's do the namespace change. So I'll go in here and do the migrate packages and classes. Not this one, sorry. Refactor, migrate packages and classes, Java EE to Jakarta EE. I'll just take the complete Duke and I'll run it. And do refactor. And here you can see it replaces all the JavaX imports with Jakarta imports. So, and that means that I can also take this Jakarta dependency and remove it from my POM file. The 8th one. So that is all there is to it. Now I'm migrated to Jakarta E9. So you can see all my imports have been changed. But that's only step 1 and 2. So there's more to it. We also did update the XML schema namespaces. So if you're using some XML configuration in your application, you probably have to at least pay attention to those. And in my application, I have one XML configuration, and that is my persistent XML. And my persistent XML here is you can see here I'm using the old JCP namespace. So what I have to change here is, just move it down a little, is to replace the jcp.org with jakarta.ee. And I'll just do it manually here. You can do it with search and replace, jakarta.ee. And also have to change the schema location. This is kind of tedious work, but it's fairly simple. Sorry. And the last one. This is where I usually type wrong, and someone in the audience have to tell me that, hey, you missed something. But I think I made it. And also, I have to have a 3.0. Yes? Yeah, I see it there. Thank you. So that's what I said, right? So and you can also see here. Yeah, there you go. And also, it will also tell me that I'm using 2.1. So I'll have to use the 3.0 version of Jakarta Persistence. So that's the namespace. It's kind of, you just have to search and replace the JCP.org with the Jakarta EE all over the line. Then you may have some properties prefixed with JavaX. And in this case, you may notice that I have them here in my XML, persistent XML file, and these are the stuff I do to generate the test data. So it has the generate and load data here. So I'll just have to replace JavaX with Jakarta here as well. So it's very consistent. This is what you have to do all over the line. The 5th step, rename bootstrapping files. That is something many of you may not be using, because this is sort of, there are a couple of examples, but one of them is the CDI extensions. And the way CDI extensions are defined is that in a file called JavaX Enterprise Inject SPI extension, you add the fully qualified class path to your extension, your implementation of that. And these are probably no surprise that you have to rename this file from JavaX Enterprise SPI to Jakarta. So that is a file rename you have to do. And the transformers will fix this for you as well. So if you use the transformers, you don't have to really think about this. The last step, verify data dynamic content. I'll just run this application first, and then I'll show what I mean with that. So to test this application, I'll run it in Glassfish 6, which is Jakarta E9. Sorry. So I'll just add the application to the artifacts, the complete Duke, add it, there you go. And then I'll deploy it. And when it deploys here, hopefully it should write hi there, which is from the CDI extension in the log file. So you can see it picks up the CDI extension and executes it. And if we look at how it will look in the web browser, it should be completely hello, and it says, howdy Jakarta E8, right? And that's where the dynamic stuff comes in. In my case, it's just a message, because we're on 9 now, so it should say hello to 9. But in other cases, you may do some stuff in, read up some properties in a property file and concatenate some strings, maybe create some JavaX prefix property or something, or maybe even class, fully qualified class names and using the JavaX stuff. So that's where you kind of have to know your application, and this will differ from application to application, what you actually have to consider. So in my case, it's just the text. So I'll just do a select. Select from greeting. And I'll go in the database and change this one to Jakarta EE9. And when I update my dynamic data, the application should say Jakarta EE9. So that's kind of where you have to figure this out. What I also can do is, and I'm not sure everybody knows it, but Jakarta EE9 actually supports Java 17 as well. So let's upgrade to Java 17. You see I'm running on 8 here, so let's take that away and upgrade to Java 17. Let's refresh this. And then maybe we should use some Java 17 features as well. And the feature that comes to my mind first is records. And if you remember my application, what I'm doing here is from my REST endpoint, I'm returning my database entity. And that is usually not a good idea to expose this stuff through your REST API. So maybe I want to do some transfer objects or something in between, a data object, so I don't expose my database stuff through the API. So let's use a record for that. So I'll add a new Java class. I'll add it as a record. I'll call it Duke's greeting record. And in this one, I'll have one field called a string a message, and I'll use a local date. Date. There you go. So this is my record. I've defined my fields, message and data, and date. And let's use this one. So I'll go into this resource. I'll return a record. Let me just get rid of this a little. And as you see, it now doesn't compile, so I have to fix my enterprise bean as well. So I'll return a record here. And this is where my fancy business logic is happening. After I find everything, the first one from the database, what I'm going to do is to map it. And I'll map it from the greeting. Greeting to a new Duke's greeting record. I'll get the greeting message, and I use local date of now. So now I've created a data object that I'm returning. And also, if I don't find anything in the database, I'll have to fix the hard-coded value as well. And I'm just going to use local date now here as well. So now I've done everything here. I'm mapped it to a record, and I'm returning it through the REST interface. So let's go and redeploy this application. And how many things this will work? A couple of you, okay. And not work. Let's see. It got empty, and why is that? Well, for EE9, the Java 17 was not covered by the TCK. We tested on 11. So for this one, the implementation of the JSON binding here is expecting a Java bean. And as you probably know, one of the properties of a Java bean is that it has a getter. And that method is called getSomething. And for a record, this object that is returned has the method called date and message. So it doesn't find the getter and the getter for us to deserialize the stuff. And there are several ways of doing this. I can, of course, add a getter and setter method. I can do some kind of JSON binding magic to make it happen. But the simplest way is actually just to call these attributes get date and get message. It's kind of a hack, but you'll see if I redeploy it now, it should work fine. If it just, it didn't go, it didn't compile. I did something wrong here. Yeah, it's this one. There. So let's find this one, redeploy, and it works fine. So this is a hack to get it to work. But yeah, that's because we didn't really build it for 17. So we've now moved it from 8 to 9. Let's move it from 9 to 10, and then I'll also look at the core profile. So I'll take the same application and upgrade it to Jakarta EE 10. And you may have noticed that the last message actually said Jakarta EE 8, and that's because I'm hard coding the values in my SQL script here. So I'll just write 10 here, so we don't have to do the database update again. And I'll do this update from 9 to 10. And this is very simple. And the only thing I have to do is to update my Maven dependency from 9 to 10. And then I should be able to deploy it into a Glassfish 7, which is Jakarta in 10, I mean. So complete Duke, there, go ahead, deploy. And it's up and running. And let's go to the Glassfish 7 and run it. And I get a exception. And this has to do with the beans XML stuff. And this is kind of a bummer. What I think is that I need to have a beans XML file in order to do this work. So I'll add a beans XML. And in the beans XML, I'll make sure it's version 4. You can see it has bean discovery mode all. But I can actually remove that and use the default, which is annotated. And now it says something. Yeah, I have to update the schema here as well, which is version 4. So I'm now on CDI 4. And when I've added the beans XML, that's all I need to be able to run this application. And it works fine. But now you notice it says get date and get message, because this is built for 17. So now we can remove this ugly hack we did in the record and call it message again. So we're back to the nice stuff. And there it works. So the CDI stuff may cost you some that you have to add this empty beans XML in order to get your application to work. It may work without it. It depends on how your application is. But that's where that's the only kind of stuff that you may get into some issues with moving from EE9 to 10. If you haven't beans XML and you have it set it annotated or at all or something, you're fine. So it's only if you don't have an bean XML or rely on the behavior of an empty bean XML that you have to consider this. And then you can add an empty beans XML like I did here. The core profile. And to demo the core profile, I'll take this application here and I'll strip away a little bit, because the core profile doesn't have the database stuff. So what I'm doing here is just the Jakarta REST, and I'm doing a build-compatible extension rather than a portable extension. And the difference here is, it depends whether you're, I'll just briefly show it, because not a lot of people are actually building CDI extensions. But if you remember this extension here, it implements the Jakarta Enterprise Inject SPI extension interface. And it has some method process annotated type, and there are some other methods you can implement to do your stuff in the extension. The new API in the core application here, it's the same application. It has the grading record and stuff. But this annotation here is implementing the build compatible extension. And this is the Jakarta Enterprise Inject Build Compatible SPI Build Compatible extension. So it's fairly verbose here as well, but it's very precise. And this API is a little bit different. You have these annotations for the different lifecycle events of CDI. And so you may have to do some investigation here and there to see if, how it maps back and forth. And I think the recommendation is that if you are running your application in a application server that supports full CDI, you should stick to the portable extensions. It's only if you're relying on the CDI Lite that you should consider this type of extensions. But that may change in the future. It's a little bit more modern API, but it's very similar. And the same thing here, rather than having your application, the bootstrapping file in the file called Jakarta Enterprise Inject SPI extension, it now has to be in a file called Jakarta Enterprise Inject Build Compatible SPI Build Compatible extension. And you don't have to remember this long name, because this is actually the package name of the interface you're implementing. So if you're creating this file from scratch, you just copy this one and create the file. So it's not that hard, even though it's a long name. If I run this one in one of the in Wildfly, which is the one of the compatible implementations for Core Profile, you can see here it writes perfectly fine this CDI stuff there. And this application also this is the core Duke. So it's also how to core. So it behaves the same way as you would expect, and the extensions are the kind of the thing that you need to think about if you're moving an application to a smaller runtime. Anybody up for sushi? You previously just had lunch, but how about looking at some cool cloud stuff? And Pyara has a pretty cool little service in Pyara Cloud. And here, this is actually based on Jakarta E8, but I'll blow this up a little. So what they have here is a very simplistic approach to how you can run your Jakarta applications in the cloud. And what you can do here, you basically just create a namespace. I created a namespace here called Duke's Demo. And you can just upload an application here. So let's see if the networks gods are with me here. And see if I'll refresh this page. There you go. So I can upload a file here. I'll choose the Sushi Duke. I'll deploy it immediately. I'll call the application for Sushi Duke and upload it. So it starts doing this stuff. And while it's deploying here, let's go and look at the application code. So this Sushi Duke is currently on Jakarta E8. I expect they will fairly soon upgrade to support Jakarta E10, because Pyara is already Jakarta E10 compatible. So I expect their cloud service will be updated. And this application is also even simpler than the other one. It's just a hard-coded message. So let's see if it has deployed there. So it says it's up and running. So I can access this application and go to the hello endpoint, and it says Duke's in the mood for sushi. So see, this is how easy it is to deploy a Jakarta application in the cloud. So who likes Kubernetes and YAML and configurations? This is just upload the file and let somebody else do it for you. So the Pyara folks, it's probably running on Azure or Amazon or whatever. Who cares? I just upload the app, it works, it's there. That's how simple it is. 7 minutes left. And let's face it, Jakarta 10 came out 2 weeks ago. It's old stuff. We're now thinking of Jakarta 11. And after 10, 11 is coming out, we've started the work, we've started the discussions. One of the discussions we're having right now is what Java SE level should we base Jakarta 11 on? And one of the suggestions are, let's raise it to 17. Another suggestion is, let's raise it to 21. But who knows what's coming in 21? How are we going to do with the testing? We probably are going to get live with 11 after SE 21 is out, so we need to make sure that it runs on 21. But whether we should raise the API levels to 21 or have a 10.01 release in between where we do some 17 stuff, or how we're going to do it, that's what we're discussing right now. And one of the issues we're going to have and going to figure out a way to solve is how to handle the removal of the security manager, because that is going to cause a little bit of headache for the implementations. You as application developers are probably not going to notice it at all, but the implementations and the test TCK will have to do some updates to get that going. There is a new specification that standardizes portable configuration across from environment-aware sources like Jakarta config. It's more or less based on a microprofile config and will be compatible in some way with microprofile config. So when Jakarta config is out, microprofile config will probably be retired, but that remains to be seen. It will be some sort of just injecting your properties, and it will read it from the environment, whether it's in Kubernetes or somewhere else. Just get the properties for you. Jakarta MVC has been around for a while. It's a 2.1 release out now, supporting Jakarta EE 10. It's the action-based MVC pattern. Whether it will be a part of 11 or not, whether it will be a part of Web Profile ever or not, that remains to be seen, but who knows? You know, it goes in circle in this business, so we'll probably go sometime in the future full circle and do server-side rendering again, and that's where MVC comes in. And it's very easy to use MVC. It's built on top of Jakarta REST. So if you know Jakarta REST, it's just a couple of annotations to learn the @controller, the @view, and some others. And then you can create a fairly easy Jakarta MVC application. And it runs on Wildfly, on Glassfish, anything Jersey, anything REST easy. Jakarta NoSQL has also been worked on for a while. It standardized the NoSQL database integration. And probably a candidate for E11. There's a new specification for Jakarta RPC, which will standardize gRPC within Jakarta EE. There's also a brand new specification that they've just started working with, so if you know anything about gRPC, please join their mailing list and chime in. Jakarta Data is also a new specification to standardize the repository pattern for data access. Think Spring Data. So this is also a brand new specification. They are discussing how they're going to do stuff. So if you have any input there, please join their mailing list and help them get moving. Jakarta Functions. What do you think? This is not something that has been proposed yet, but should we standardize cloud functions in some way or the other, or is that going too far? Please do discuss on the community mailing list if you think this is a good idea or bad idea. To sum up, Jakarta E9 lowered the entry barriers. It's a platform for innovation, which 10 shows it is, and the migration path with the Jakarta namespace is fairly easy. The namespace was the big thing of 9. For 10, we have a lot of changes. It shows that Jakarta EE is really moving forward. All of these blue specifications got updates. We introduced a new core profile to enable smaller clients to compile to native, and we are looking forward to see how the uptake of this specification will be. We raised the API level to language level to 11. We are running on 17, so please go ahead and try it out. There are lots of implementations out there. Go to jakarta.ee/download or compatibility or whatever it is. Find the implementations and try them out. You can find everything you need at jakarta.ee. It's super simple to remember, but if you remember one thing from this talk, it's jakarta.ee. That's the starting point for everything. We have a blog aggregator called Jakarta Blogs. If you write something about Jakarta or something similar about Java in general, you can get listed there. So it's a fairly easy description for how to supply your blog content to this aggregator, and you will get some promotion there. I write a weekly blog post. It's also on Jakarta Blogs, but also on my domain and on the Eclipse Foundation. The demo code from this application is called Jakarta EE Duke. It's on my GitHub. You can just search for Jakarta EE Duke. I'm pretty sure it's the only example you'll find. And with that, thank you very much for listening. I have a little bit of swag here, so the 5 or 6 first person down here will get some nice swag here. Thank you very much for listening.